Hey guys, welcome along to Sceam Me Up Botty. I am your host, Rodney Stewart. We're going to get into a little bit of Star Trek in this episode. A quick run over of the shows and the movies, and just a little bit in the history of what has come and what we've got right now, and where I fall at between what I enjoy more, old Star Trek or new Star Trek. Now, while I've been researching a lot of stuff online for Star Trek, I've come across a few things that I hadn't heard of before. Now, we all know the real mainstream stuff, like Star Trek, the original series. We all know that, of course. The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and for me that was the main things. Of course, there's the animated series as well that took place shortly after the original series. And while I was online looking up different things, I came across Star Trek short tracks from 2018, TV series of 10 episodes. Anson Mount, Ethan Peck, obviously a kind of a testing ground for the new Star Trek Anson Mount series. What's it? Strange New Worlds, it's going to be called. And one that I had never heard of before, according to IMDb, it ran from 2013 to 2017, 11 episodes, was Star Trek Continues. And I'm not even going to attempt to say some of these names of the cast. Vic Mignogna, Todd Habercorn. Basically, it was, from what I've seen, I watched the better part of an episode. One was late on one evening, and I had to get up at stupid o'clock in the morning for work, and I came across one of these episodes on YouTube of Star Trek Continues, and it was basically a different cast on the original series Enterprise, and it was done in the same style as the original show. So I'm coming across stuff here like pretty much a lifelong fan of Star Trek, but in saying that, there is quite a few things that I haven't delved into as deeply as I would like, and that's the point of this podcast too, is to really, really delve deep into Star Trek. So that's the old shows and whatnot, and of course we get into the new generation of TV shows at the moment, of course, with Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard and Lower Decks. Now, I don't want to hit on the new Star Trek stuff. I really don't like it. I'm enjoying the shows. I thought Discovery season 1 was pretty strong, although it got a bit of a backlash because of the amount of changes that were made to existing property on there, like the Klingons not looking like Klingons, and people were not really content with some of the designs of the ships on it. That didn't annoy me so badly, because I was looking forward to seeing some new Star Trek. It's been a long time since we got something from Star Trek, and I was willing to give anything a chance. And I do believe that when CBS done new ones, when they pretty much like the rights to Star Trek were transferred over to them, they were forced to make a certain percentage of changes within the show to be allowed to actually make the show. Now, for me, those little changes, as far as, and you're talking Klingons are a big part of Star Trek looking so different, I can forgive that because of what we got at the end of the last episode of season 1, which was when, and we were all waiting for it. The show was set, 10 years, I believe, before the original series was meant to take place. So, of course, you're thinking to yourself, and anybody that wasn't thinking this, watching the entire series, we're a little bit out of touch, because you're thinking, okay, it's 10 years before Kirk and has run on the original series. So, of course, the Enterprise is out there somewhere, been captained by Captain Pike. And, of course, I was waiting the whole way through. Like, there was multiple times throughout season 1 where Enterprise could have turned up, and they left it to the very end of the first episode of season 1, and that was just beautiful to see that ship come flying in and stopping nose to nose of Discovery, because it is a nice version of the end. I don't think it's as iconic as the Enterprise from the movies, the motion picture, the Wrath of Khan. I love that Enterprise. It's probably my favourite out of all of them. But this new Enterprise was a nice mix between the movie Enterprise and the original series Enterprise. The nacelles were very original series looking. The rest of the ship was very much motion picture Wrath of Khan Enterprise, and I thought that was just beautiful. Season 2 was a smash with me. I really enjoyed season 2 of Discovery, and season 3, the wheels kind of fell off. Season 3 for me. We'll get into that in more detail later on in the run of the podcast. So, Star Trek Picard, I enjoyed that, but the unfortunate thing for that series was it was following up from Star Trek Nemesis. They had to tie up kind of like the loose ends from where that movie ended off, and of course, as we all know, that movie pretty much ended the run of movies at that point. And yes, what I found about Star Trek Picard was the content that it covered. Please excuse the noise outside the studio. The amount of stuff that they covered in that series, I felt was very, very much stretched out, and I do have, in a way, a similar complaint to Discovery. And I think a big part of it was there was no captain's log in there. Picard, you'd have thought would be a character that would keep like a personal log and whatnot as well. And classic Star Trek, the original series, Next Generation, Voyager, DS9, we had the captain's log, which was a very good thing for, covering a bit of territory within a storyline. If they wanted to jump to something later on, and there's a big piece of story, they could put it under like a captain's log, which actually ended up putting more into an episode than what you can do without the captain's log sort of thing. So I thought a lot of the stuff in those series could have been compressed into like logs here and there. But yes, I think Picard in particular, if it was done in the style of classic Star Trek, generation, Next Generation and whatnot, I feel like it could have been, that entire series could have been like a 4-parter for like in the old school storytelling of the original shows. Star Trek Lower Decks. Now, I'm going to give this show a fair chance. I really am. But here in the UK, we've only recently got it, and I've been trying to find a little bit of time to sit down and kind of, if I'm going to give it a chance, I want to sit down and I want to try and binge it over a weekend. But I do have to say the style of humour that's in that show up to this point, and I don't want to write the series off completely, because it is Star Trek, it's new Star Trek, it's something new, And you know, in all fairness, I watched the opening few scenes of it, and then you get the opening titles of the episode. But again, this was one night where I had to get up at stupid o'clock for work, and I kind of just, I'll give us a little blast here for a few minutes to see what it's like. And the style of humour in it, for me, is in that opening part where the characters, it opens up with, and forgive me, no character names at this point, because literally it was just a watch this opening credits. And he's doing the captain's log, and you think it is the captain, but you find out it's this lower ranked ensign, and his friend jumps in and starts making fun of him for, oh, you're making a captain's log, sort of a thing. And for me, that joke after that there, it led on to like another joke. She's got this like trolley full of gear and whatnot, and the humour coming from her making fun of him coming out and showing this stuff, and she pulls out a Klingon weapon and starts messing about, and it's a similar criticism to what I had to the 2016 Ghostbusters. It was like they crack a joke, but they go about 7 beats too long with the joke. And for me, by the time that first piece of, I'm going to say new comedy, because it's something that just misses the mark of me a lot of times. And it's not that I don't get the joke, but I'm just thinking, okay, you're tearing the ass out of it now. Like, you made the joke, you got the laugh, 25 to 30 seconds later you're still hanging on to that joke, trying to get a few more beats from it. And for me, before the opening credits rolled on Lower Decks, I was kind of, I'd failed the social media test. I had lifted the phone and I was checking out the Twitter feed. But again, I don't want to write the show off. That's not fair of me to say that of the show so far. But the humour at that stage just missed the mark completely. It was just like, oh, this is going to be a rough one. But and saying that, where do I fall at on new Star Trek and old Star Trek? Which is better for me? I'm enjoying bar Lower Decks at this point. I'm enjoying all of it. I love the original series. Of course, that was before my time, but I was only a kid when The Next Generation came out. I was barely 9-10 years old when the first episode of Next Generation came out, and the only show that I haven't really gotten into, just because of where I was at in my life when it was airing, was DS9. And according to all reports, Deep Space Nine is probably one of the most iconic shows from the history of Star Trek. So it's not that I haven't seen any of DS9, but not enough to actually give it a fair review. I'm a huge fan of Voyager. That show, for me, I like the feel of Voyager, I have to say. So between Next Generation and Voyager, they're probably my 2 favourite shows at this point. And Enterprise was another one where I was at in my life didn't allow for to keep up with the show when it was originally on television. At that point, I was married, working, keeping the mortgage, roof over the head, food on the table, sort of a thing. And just with the work schedule I had at that time, and the way it was broadcast in the UK, just a lot of the first run I missed simply because I just wasn't home in time to see it. But since then, of course, streaming and whatnot, got caught up on it and absolutely love Enterprise now as well. But a slightly different feel, of course, that's what they were going for in that series. But, you know, for me, the classic stuff is far, far better, because I just feel that the stories and the stuff that they covered on those shows, they did a lot more than what these newer shows are doing. Again, it feels to me, particularly in Star Trek Picard, that they had a 4-episode story that they stretched out as far as they could get over, and by the time you were getting to the point of some of the shows, you were just losing not all interest. It kept me interested, don't get me wrong, but you know, you're just thinking classic Star Trek would have covered this much quicker. So I'm really, really looking forward to Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I think Captain Pike in season 2 of Discovery was a bigger hit than what the producers were actually thinking that he was going to be. And it took me a little while to warm up to the new Spock, but you know, it's a new generation, and if you go back to the older shows like Star Trek The Next Generation, of course the internet wasn't out by then, but if you look at some of the reports and reviews that come out in that show at the very beginning, they were criticising The Next Generation in the same way that they're criticising Discovery and Picard and all these newer shows. Nobody believed The Next Generation would have worked at the very beginning. Pretty much the same with Enterprise. I think a lot of people wrote Enterprise off completely at the start, didn't give it a fair chance. But again, the criticisms we're seeing nowadays for the new stuff is exactly the same as the criticism we were seeing back in the day for Next Generation, DS9 and Voyager. And you know, every time a new show comes out, there's always a fan base of the previous shows that are kind of, you know, they don't want to cheat on their lover sort of a thing. But you know, all Star Trek is good Star Trek, and even though I am more old school than the newer stuff now, I genuinely believe that, you know, new Star Trek can only do good for old Star Trek. There's a friend of mine who was never a Trekkie. This is literally, it was a post on Facebook about 2 weeks ago, and he had posted that and admitted himself, I've never been a Trekkie, but I've just started watching Star Trek Discovery on Netflix and I'm binge watching it. I absolutely love it, sort of thing. That's not word for word, but it's pretty much the gist of what he was saying. And I'm thinking to myself, gosh, you are in for such a treat if after Star Trek Discovery you go back and start binge watching Star Trek from the very beginning. The original series, The Next Generation, DS9, Voyager. You know, it's just, for me, the older stuff was so much better than the newer stuff at this point. I'm holding high hopes for Strange New Worlds, but depends how they work with that. It's, you know, it's very much classic Star Trek. If you're going to be using Pike and the Enterprise and that crew, I'm interested to see where it goes. But as far as I'm concerned, there is not a bad Star Trek show, and I definitely want to try and keep that frame of mind going into Lower Decks. I have actually read and watched a few reviews online about the show, and it seems for a lot of people that it hasn't hit the mark for them either. But if I can get past that sort of humour, I don't know. It's just that 2016 Ghostbusters again. Perfect example. In that movie, there's a part with the Ghostbusters, the female cast Ghostbusters, are going through like a storeroom, and there's these mannequin heads, and we come across, and of course it's one of the girls, hiding in the racks with a wig on, and the other Ghostbuster sees her, jump scare, funny. It was the girl playing a prank on her, so she scares her. Joke done, we got the laugh, and then she goes into this whole thing about, was it the wig? Was the wig far too much, sort of thing. So that's what I mean by the humour being pressed too far. For me, that joke would have landed a lot better and a lot funnier if it was a bit more subtle than that. They do the jump scare, she gives her a wink or something like that there, and we move on. So there was a lot of that I found in the 2016 Ghostbusters, and that is my fear for Star Trek Lower Decks in particular. Please, if you're going to do a comedy, cartoon comedy of Star Trek on a starship, crack the jokes and move on. It just worries me slightly. But again, it's going to be Lower Decks is going to be someone's introduction to the universe of Star Trek, and that can only be a good thing, because again, like this guy, his first introduction, Star Trek Discovery, that show, as much as I've enjoyed it, it's nothing compared to the older stuff, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes. What else have we got here? Yes, there's a few worries have surfaced online for Discovery. At the end of season 3, they closed it out in a very, this is the final episode sort of a note. And I know everything that's going on the planet now with COVID-19 and whatnot, everything's up in the air. We don't know what's happening. But I have read somewhere that Netflix was a huge investor in the show, and they signed a free season deal with them, and they weren't 100% happy with the first season of Discovery, and because they were in the free season deal, they were kind of, and this could be hearsay, but it's supposed to be they were in and out of court trying to get out of their contract with the company that creates Discovery. And when Discovery was due to come out, on the lead up to release to it, there was rumours of a heck of a lot of reshoots. And what we think happened there was, throughout season 1 and 2 of Discovery, you had little pieces of story that were foreshadowing something that was, to come later down the line. So you'd be getting in season 1, you'd be getting a few things here that would pay off in season 2. So of course, when they were filming season 3, they might have been doing that. They might have been putting in little story arcs and whatnot to point to something that was going to happen in season 4. And what a lot of people believe happened in those reshoots was they brought the cast back and took out the stuff that was foreshadowing season 4 and reshot a lot of stuff to, close up the gaps and make the season more self-contained. Now, just because that happens doesn't mean there's not going to be a season 4. Apparently, at this point, they have said that season 4 is going to be happening. But in all fairness, I've heard that a lot over the years. There's a lot of shows have promised that something is going to happen, and then something happens, an investor pulls out, and it ends up, it never happens. So curious to see what happens with this and how far it's going to get and whatnot. But I think that's going to do it for this episode. Forgive me if I repeated myself quite a bit there. I tend to do that from time to time. But I don't want to be like reading off scripts on these podcasts. I want this to be like a, just turn it on, get something to talk about, and just go to town on it and see where we go with that. So please bear with me. Relatively new to the audio podcast format, and yes, I'm just trying to break myself in and get used to audio only. I've got no problem whatsoever being on YouTube, vlogging on my camera. I can talk shit for hours doing that, but just to do basic audio, a little bit too self-aware, too in my own head. So forgive me. I'll try and get myself out of that there. So guys, I hope that you enjoyed this episode of Sceam Me Up Botty, and I will see you in the next episode. This has been a production of Coins Edge Media. Check out my social media links in the show notes. Thank you so much for